Hello, folks. This is yours truly, Randy Rand, and welcome to another edition of today's talk. Today, we talk to Celeste Douglas Wheeler. She's the principal out at MS 57, located in Bedford Stuyvesant, New York, out in Brooklyn, New York. And I am very impressed with what she is doing out there at MS 57. Um, they're 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 teaching the arts. And once you listen to the interview, you'll hear and understand how they're interjecting learning the arts with learning of academics, and they're doing a great job out there. They're even teaching their students about the many uses of propaganda, and of course what propaganda is. And they're doing a great work out there in MS 57. They've put together 5 musicals, in their school. Now, I want you to think about that. Anytime a school puts together a production, a musical production, or a play, or what have you, it takes a lot of work, and it's a lot to do. Well, this school has put together 5 musicals, which I think is a daunting task in itself. Again, I can't say enough about what they're doing out there at MS 57, which was a failing school, and due to uh, Celeste's hard work and leadership and the work of her very dedicated and committed staff, they turned that school around, which, gives proof and serves as proof. All you need is some good people and some good professionals that have their heads on straight, and they can turn around a very losing situation. So enjoy the interview, and thank you so much. Okay, and we're back. Yours truly, Randy Rand, here in the house, and welcome to today's talk. We are talking with Celeste Douglas Wheeler. She is the principal of MS 57, and she was so very good to give us some of her time today. How you doing, Celeste?
I am doing very well. How are you?
Very good, thanks. We're going to get to it and do it. Why don't you introduce yourself to Westchester County?
Hi, my name is Celeste Douglas. I've been a principal for almost 10 years of a fabulous middle school. I'm located in the Bedford-Stuyvesant section of Brooklyn.
Now, Celeste, good leaders allow and challenge their members to make decisions that are beneficial to the team. Do you believe this? And if so, please give us an example of when you've done this.
I think it's a fundamental core belief that I believe, and I think all really good leaders do. I think a leader is only as good as her team. An example I remember early on is when I was deciding to change my school schedule. Because at the time when I took the school over, we had a significant amount of students who were reading about 5 years below grade level. And so imagine if you're in middle school from grade 6 to 8, you might have students who are 11 years old reading at second and third grade reading level. And I really wanted to make sure that they had, intense time built into their schedule that was for intensive remediation. And at that time, my schedule didn't permit that. The easy way to have done that would have just been to change the schedule and give it to the teachers. But I knew I was new. I knew that I didn't know every single thing that was happening on in school. And I also knew that there might have been some consequences to those decisions that I didn't even think about. So I met with my team, and it was really funny. My team told me not to change the schedule for the entire building. They told me to pilot it out with my incoming sixth graders because if we did it that way, we could see any pitfalls, we can see what our strengths were, and we can use those strengths to make the program bigger. And it worked. When we first started small, we were able to see some small glitches, and by seeing those small glitches, we were able to scale it so that it could meet the needs of all our students. And within, I want to say, a year and a half, we had a school-wide intervention model.
Now, that's a good thing, starting off, being that you're, the new principal of the school and everything, and you've gotten the teachers as well as the other staff telling you, though, hey, don't try and, do this, but try this. And it sounds like, things were kind of, melting together
Right.
as far as, making things work. And that's a very good thing, and I'm sure it made your job a lot easier.
I think you have to honor the voices. I think sometimes as a leader, you have to let go of your ego.
Uh huh.
You have to understand that sometimes the answer is in the room, and that the answer might not be in your voice, but might be in somebody else's voice. So it's really important that when you have a problem or you're starting a new initiative, that you get You get your important stakeholders around the table, and you guys really brainstorm and you really think about it systematically, so that you can really anticipate what the problems can be and come up with the answers beforehand.
Okay, now when you took over the school, as we've already established, it was a failing school,
Yes,
and
failing school.
if you could please talk about the pressure that you've encountered taking over the failing school and turning it around into a successful school.
The pressure was enormous. You're always thinking about school closure. You're always thinking about, how can I market a school that's not doing well. You're always thinking about, am I really servicing my children the way they need to be? And the last thing you're thinking about is, am I going to be able to keep my job? And so for me, it was really, what I took off the table was I going to keep my job? I couldn't think about that. My main thing was I needed to make sure that my kids, this was a place that my kids wanted to come to, that my parents trusted, and that my teachers wanted to come to, and that my teachers would put their own children in. And once we came up with that philosophy, like we want this to be a type of school where you would send your own child, that if your child was sitting in your classroom, would you be impressed? I think that's when we really started thinking about, what our mission and our vision was, and really making it a school that, we would be proud of. And I think, early on we had some really quick wins. You know, early on we were able, to really get kids to start wanting to come. And so early on attendance started going up. Early on we started celebrating our students' strengths. Early on teachers started working together. And I think, those mini wins allowed us to have bigger wins.
Now, you mentioned the parents that you've had to have, uh, well, actually, the parents that you're working with there in your school. In doing research for this interview, I see that you've established the kind of rapport with parents where you sometimes may come out of your own pocket
Yes,
to see that your students be able to meet certain criteria or initiatives or what. That's a very special kind of relationship.
my parents are, first of all, you have to understand, like, my kids, my children, mean the world to me. Like,
Hmm.
I don't know if, you know this job, it's not a job. I feel like it's like purpose. It's what God has like built me to do. So this job to me is an amazing opportunity. And I think, my parents, I see them as kind of like my partners, but
Hmm.
I see them as, trusting me to do the work that I'm called to do. And, when my parents are hurt, the children are hurt. And so, in any way that I can help my parents to be, strong and to be well and to feel safe, I'm going to do that. And so if that means, having to pay rent, I've done it. If that means, having to drop parents certain places, I've done it. If that means, trying to help parents get a job, I've done that. If that means, crying with a parent, I've done that. If that means, calling parents up at night and us, trying to figure out, an action plan for them to help them improve their daughter's behavior, I've done it. Because that's what you do when you're in a partnership. So, and the partnership doesn't end when the students graduate. I still speak to many of my parents. And I feel like, lots of times people demonize parents. No one has children and say, I want to mess them up. Parents are doing the best that they can, with what they
Hmm.
have. And
Hmm.
it's our job to, help them do the best that they can. And that's like my main belief. It's that you have to be parents partners, and they have to feel like that you respect them, that you care about them, but you also that you're not someone that's patronizing them. You have to believe that they're an important member of your community.
We are speaking to Celeste Douglas Wheeler. She's the principal of MS 57, Middle School 57 out in Brooklyn, New York, Bedford Stuyvesant, New York, and she's giving us some of her very valuable time today. Celeste, I read an article entitled Focusing on Tomorrow, Principal Celeste Douglas Wheeler on the Power of Count Me In. And in that article, you said, and I'm quoting, our kids are seen as nobodies, and nobody really focuses on them. In your opinion, why is this true, and what strategies other than arts education can be used to strengthen these children's chances at achieving academic success?
I think in general, sometimes we forget that children are children and that children make mistakes. And I think, when I said that comment, um, I was speaking from a place of sometimes feeling that our children who are most in need are the children that are the most ignored. And I speak that from, not even from being a principal. I speak that from being a student who, was, sometimes felt like people didn't notice what was going on in my life. And I feel like, the arts are important, but mentorship is really important. I think about how many of our children are really need an adult who's able to kind of like show them the way or show them that no matter how bad it gets, that there is somebody here who can help you, steer you towards, where you're supposed to be. I also know that many times people give up on 12 and 13-year-olds, and I think about the media, and I think about how we look at, boys of color, and I think about, how sometimes, children at a young age are just seen as adults. And I think, in the society, we have to realize they are children and that, children need guidance. And I think mentorship is important. And I also think, quality, and I don't want to make this seem so simple, but a quality education that, ensures that students are critical thinkers and students are able to, figure out, how this world works and how democracy works and how to, and how to be functional citizens of the world, I think is important. And I think that comes from courageous and engaging curriculum. I think schools need to have curriculum that's relevant to children. And I think, schools need to, I think people sometimes forget where we are in this time period. And we're in a time period where, technology is everywhere and kids can text and, on social media and, how fast their brains are working. And, is our curriculum that fast and engaging? And I think, that's important to me. And I think when I sometimes, when I say children, sometimes I'm seen as nobodies, I think sometimes we we forget to talk to children about what they need. And I think the voice of the student is really important. And I think we need to make them more vocal in our schools.
Now, sticking to the same article, you said that, and I quote, nobody talks about the consistent systematic structures that need to be in place to engage these students, end of quote. Could you please explain what you meant by consistent systematic structures?
Okay, so when you have students that are struggling, right,
Yes.
you can't put a Band-Aid. So if a child can't read, right, it shouldn't be that every single year we're trying to figure this out. We know that in our system there are going to be children who can't read. And so I think, as school principals, you have to come up with a structure that helps you to assess that, and it also helps you to provide intervention. And I think it needs to be something that is system-wide, because when you leave as principal, if teachers leave, it still remains. So that no matter who's in charge or no matter who's in front of those students, there's a structure and a system that we know that when we have struggling students, there is a specific intervention for them. And to me, I think that's something school leaders really have to think about and develop. And if they're not talking about that, it's something that, they should be worried about. You need to know who are our struggling learners. What are they struggling? And what is my systematic structure to, address that issue? Yes, I mean, here's the thing. After third grade, reading becomes more about figuring out and comprehension than decoding. And so after third, if we know kids can't decode after third grade, we're about to, basically create this crazy learning gap for that student if we don't do something dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important that we realize that, if a child is not reading, you can't read, can't decode by third grade, if we don't do something dramatic,
Mm-hmm.
we are cutting that child's life opportunity in half. And I think it's an emergency. And I think we need to be ringing the alarm. And I think, reading is something, that to me I'm passionate about, and about a reading culture and about students really being able to comprehend. And I think, when we look at prisons and we look at, what's going on in society, it's, most of the, the people we see in prison have reading issues.
And I guess it's good to say also that uh, it's good not only to learn who your learning difficulty students that are having the learning difficulty, but as early on as possible. I would say that would probably be even more beneficial. Would it not?
And I think we could cut a lot of crime down with our youngsters if we attack their learning issues at an early age.
Certainly, I've. You're not the first one to have even suggested that that I've talked to. You mentioned the emergency. I would certainly say it is an emergency. I'd even dare take it a step further and saying that this is an epidemic. Um, as a lot of our children are not only are they not reading on level, but they're not reading at all.
Yes.
And it's only getting worse and worse. And as they get older, and they still don't know how to read, it just increases their inability to make certain good choices in life, and it certainly uh, disables them to make a good living out here, and to live a good, prosperous life. It is an epidemic. I would definitely agree with what you said there. I would say that it's safe to say that you believe that arts education is a vital key in students achieving academic success.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. I think what people don't talk about a lot is the engagement gap.
Mm-hmm.
There's an achievement gap, but there's an engagement gap. So many students, see school as a trial and tribulation that they want to get over.
Mm-hmm.
And not something they want to continue. And if we don't teach our young people that education is something amazing, that it's something that it's something that can change your life, that is something that you should want to continue, then we're going to have a problem. And because they're not going to want to go towards higher education. And so I feel like what the arts does is it engage a different part of the brain. And it does something. It makes you see the beauty in the beauty in the world. Right, and I think that's important. I think children need to be able to see the beauty in the world, and I think they need to be engaged. And I think the arts engages, a different part of the brain that the core subjects does too. And I think it's important. And here's the thing: it shouldn't matter the zip code. The zip code shouldn't determine if you're going to have an arts education.
Okay.
And I'm passionate about that. The zip code. Children in poor neighborhoods should not have to give the arts so that they can have higher reading scores. That should not be it.
Mm-hmm.
And our schools should not feel like jails. Our schools should be rich learning places, and that's why I love the work that New York City is doing with ensuring that schools have arts in their buildings. I love the work that New York City is doing. The New York I feel like the chancellor is really working hard to make sure that arts are a priority in our schools.
We are speaking to Celeste Douglas Wheeler. She is the principal of MS 57 out in Bedford Stuyvesant, in Brooklyn, New York, and she's kind enough to give us some of her time today. Celeste, if you could please speak about your school's emphasis on social justice and a quote unquote restorative approach to building relationships with your students.
You know what? I think it's something that we do, and I'm gonna be honest with you, it's something we struggle with sometimes, because middle school to me is one of the toughest ages groups to work on. 1 minute they're like wonderful, next minute they're crazy. But the reason why I feel like you need to have a restorative approach is because it's again what I said in the beginning. You don't give up on children.
Sure.
And what a restorative approach does, it allows the child to be able to reflect on their behavior, but it restores them to the community. Punishment to me, and it's not that I'm against punishment, but punishment does one thing. The punishment deals with the consequence, and it tells the student what they did is wrong, right?
Yes.
Restorative has the child being able to reflect on that. And it restores the child. It makes the child think about, okay, what did I do that offended the community? What do I need to do? What's the lesson behind this? And what can I give back to the community?
Mm-hmm.
And when I see a restorative approach does two things. When I really do a good restorative approach, kids are tearful. And they're not tearful because they're scared. They're tearful because they feel like they're disappointed the community.
Uh-huh.
And to me, that does much more in changing behavior than just giving a consequence. And so, with our restorative approach, we have restorative justice circles, where students are being trained to, in a circle, really discuss what the issue is, and then help each other kind of navigate the consequence and also navigate what was the misunderstanding. I'm trying to teach children that you don't always have to deal with things in anger. You can deal with things in reflection. And, I'm seeing it. Today we had a situation where a child was upset,
Mm-hmm.
and, she was having a blowout, and I watched every adult, instead of screaming or yelling, just keep talking her through it. At the end of the day, in tears in her eyes, she came back apologizing. And if we had handled the way we used to handle, where it was just, okay, here's the consequence, and that's it, without the restorative approach, she wouldn't have cared. She would have been mad at us.
Yes.
But with this restorative approach, guess what? They're mad at themselves, and they're disappointed, and then they want to change. And I think that's what it's about. It's about really getting kids to reflect and think about, what do I need to do to own this behavior. But it's hard, though,
Yes, it
because
is.
a restorative approach takes a little longer.
Yes, it does. There's a lot of work in it.
It's a lot of work.
Yes, it is.
And you got to let
I,
go of your pride.
yeah, you do. You have to swallow. As a matter of fact, you have to check your pride at the door.
Hmm.
A lot of times where all of us will find ourselves saying, boy, if that would have been me, I would have did this, that, the
Hmm.
other, and the third. And okay, well, if that's how you feel, that's how you feel. But it's not really going to render any good to the child. Really quick, I was a part of a effort here in Westchester County. It was called Raise the Age of Criminal Accountability, and basically what that was saying was it's talking about the same restorative approach. If a child goes out here and they make a mistake or whatever, as it stands right now, the child can be charged as an adult,
Hmm.
and they don't even have to. The police don't even have to call the parents. That's true. That's true for here in New York State as well as North Carolina, and a lot of proponents of the Raise the Age campaign were talking about a restorative approach. Instead of charging them as adults, show them where they did wrong. If there's a consequence, there's a consequence. But at the same time, bring them back into, there's the word you used again, community.
Yep.
Bring them back into the community. Let them see what they did wrong, and maybe they can establish a better rapport with the community, and they'll feel more of, a part of the community. So they'll think, just like you said, they'll think about it the next time. Because they don't want to offend the community. They don't want to let anybody down. Because they feel a part of something. And I think that's a major benefit of the restorative approach.
And I think what people forget, people keep saying when they hear restorative, like, oh, there's no consequence. There's a consequence, but the way you handle the giving out that consequence is very different. You never with a restorative approach, you don't discipline in anger. You discipline in reflection. And and I've seen it work. I use this approach. I used this approach when I was a teacher. And I didn't even know it was a restorative approach. It was just the way I felt like I wanted to be treated as a kid.
Sure.
And I never, and I can say this, as a teacher and as a principal, I don't have big issues with students. And it's because I always look at them as, what, if I was in their shoes, how would I want someone to speak to me?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that's really important.
Could you please talk about your school's efforts to teach your students about propaganda? As I'm switching gears a little bit here now.
This I really have to praise my eighth grade social studies teacher. We do a lot of work at looking at history. And if you look at history, you see the themes of propaganda. You see what Hitler did, right?
Yes.
And how he used propaganda to really, convince a nation of people to exterminate another group of people. And we look at propaganda in the news. We looked at when with Trayvon Martin, we had students looking at Fox News and looking at the different news articles from the New York Times and talking about who's telling this story and whose point of view is in this story. And we always tell the kids, consider the point of view.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that
Yes.
news comes from a point of view, so that's why you can't just take it as truth. And I think that starts with our curriculum. Our curriculum is always, especially our history curriculum, always really looking at who is telling the story.
Yep.
What do they stand to gain in this story? And what do you know? And when we say what do you know, so what kind of background do you need to do? And I think that's really important if you're trying to raise citizens of the world. I think about, how Donald Trump is, using, similar propaganda type techniques and using, really inaccurate, statistics, right? And people are falling for it.
Yes.
Right? And I don't want my kids to fall for propaganda, And if they're going to be, the next, future leaders, I need them to be able to critically, look at an issue and see the different points of view and make a knowledgeable, decision on their own, knowing what they know, but also doing some sort of background, doing some sort of background checks and really, trying to do some sort of research before they just believe what they're seeing or hearing.
Critical thinking. That's a very big 21st century skill. Using critical thinking skills. That you had just said. I think it's very important. Consider the source. Always consider the source. And you mentioned what Hitler did. He fooled a lot of people. Oh man, what he did was just unbelievably wrong and massively wrong. And
Yeah.
you mentioned what Mr. Trump is doing. I don't know what his people around him are trying to prove, but he's going to sink. He's going to sink very, very badly. But I'm very impressed, to tell you the truth, with what your school is doing with regards to teaching your students about the uses of propaganda, and of course, again, to consider the source. I think that's viable. It's very, very important. You have a Saturday school for sixth graders.
Yes.
If you could please speak about this program and whatever success you're meeting with it.
So definitely. So we just started about 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And what we did was we really looked at our data. And, that's another thing our school is really strong with analyzing our data and really looking for trends and themes. And what we noticed was that our sixth graders needed, some, emergency intervention. And so we mandated every single sixth grader student to come to Saturday school. And the funny thing is that I want to say we only had 3 students who didn't show up.
Wow.
And they were excited because we didn't do Saturday school, like regular school.
Uh-huh.
We had an arts and sports component in the morning, so that kids, we got them engaged right away, and also we did a lot of partnership work, and we're doing things different. So because we've looked at the data, kids are grouped according to exactly what they need, and we immerse them in technology. And the classes are really small.
Okay.
So we'll have students like this class with 8 or 9 students because we want them to get exactly what they need. And our goal is to ensure that since we see that there's some work our students need to do with writing, our goal is to ensure that our students are able to increase their writing skills before the end of the school year. And we feel
Okay.
like when you see something, so my thing is when you see something in your data, and even when I talked about a systematic approach,
Yes.
that's what we do. You got to come up with a systematic approach. And so the reason why we said, okay, let's begin Saturday school with just the sixth grade and start it early and make it mandatory was because we saw something. But we knew we didn't just want to focus on 1 or 2 kids. We wanted to make it systematic.
When I first saw that, I was thinking, I said, something, it's going to be programs like that, I think, that help and do their part in making a difference for a lot of students because, you know, you can never get enough education, and certainly
Never.
you can never have enough time. You can never have too much time. I'm sorry. You can never have too much time to learn. If you're doing no more than just reading and just reading,
Yes, yes.
you can never spend too much time learning. So I'm certainly on board with the Saturday school initiative, and I certainly hope that works out well for you.
I know it will.
Your students actually sing Italian opera?
We had a partnership with Carnegie Hall,
Uh huh.
and part of that partnership was that they learned Italian opera. And it was amazing. I remember the first time I saw them do it, and a parent was bawling. She could not believe that was her student. She couldn't believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And what she said to me was like, my student hardly talks when she's home. Like, she's so shy.
Mm-hmm.
But what it was that I think sometimes we don't get the gift that our kids have.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'm so in love with the arts, because the arts show you another side. This girl was so shy and so quiet, but when she started, singing in this soprano voice with
Mm-hmm.
these Italian lyrics, I mean, there was not a dry, eye in the house.
Wow.
It was amazing.
And one last question. Your school has produced 5 musicals and
Yes,
received significant funding over the years.
yes.
What strategy did you employ in garnering the necessary grant funding?
Um, I hate this word, but I'm a hustler.
Okay.
I will go and speak to anyone I need to.
Okay.
And I will tell our story to whoever I have to tell our story to. And I was really lucky to, my first year, become partnership with SASSY, which is the School Art Support Initiative, and did a lot of work with them and with trying to bring the arts into our school. And then they connected me to another organization, and then they did a walkthrough, and they asked me what I wanted, and I told them my story. I think it's about principals have to know their story and know what they want and their goals, and know this big picture. And that big picture is your vision. Like, where do you see your school in 5 years, and what do you need to make it happen? And I know that's what I want.
When I was, again, doing my research for this interview, and I'm like, what?
Mhm.
5 musicals? Wow, man. I mean, some schools are lucky if they can pull off one.
No, 5.
And then if it's 2, well, then that's certainly unheard of. But 5,
And we're doing the Wiz this year.
wow. When is that performance going on of the
It's
Wiz?
usually in the end of May.
End
So
of
if you
May.
keep in contact with me, we invite you.
And I should reach out to you, and anyone should
Yes,
reach out to
yes,
you.
yes. Come see us. Bedford Stuyvesant, Ron Brown Academy, The Wiz.
We have been speaking with Celeste Douglas Wheeler. She's the principal of MS 57 out in Bedford Stuyvesant in Brooklyn, New York, and she's been so gracious as to give us some of her very valuable time today. If there's anything that you'd like to plug right now, please feel free.
I just want to say that, our children are really amazing. I'm talking about children in general, and I just really want to implore your listening audience to really take time to mentor a child, and that mentorship could be in any way, whether it's you take them to the library, whether you help them do their homework, whether you take them to a Broadway play, or whether you say a kind word. Mentorship is important, and also if there's anything you feel like you can be of service to our school, our doors are, my door is open, and you can always, you have my information. So if anybody would like to email, you can Google us. But if anything, if there's anything that you would like to share, we're here. But I just really want to talk about mentorship and really helping children. I think children truly deserve to be given as, children really deserve to be seen as the jewels they are. And, I just want to implore your audience to, mentor a child.